We are with George Araman. George, hello.
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 How are you, Darren?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. So I'm Darren. This is George, and we're here today to talk with you about HBDI and negotiation. In fact, the title of this podcast I'll read out. My negotiations always get to an annoying stalemate. Use HBDI to understand your opponent to avoid stalemates. So, George, we're talking about negotiation and HBDI. The reason you're here is you're what we would call a naive resource. You've just completed your HBDI profile. Is that right?
Yay! Correct.
Okay, fabulous, fabulous. So you're going to ask me lots of probing, challenging questions, particularly around HBDI and how we can use it with negotiation. All right.
Love it.
All right, so let's do a couple of minutes on your understanding of HBDI and what this profile meant to you. What did it mean to you doing your profile?
It was interesting because I found a couple of things. It was interesting. I discovered things I was aware of, some I wasn't really aware of. A couple of so when I was asked to anticipate the results, I actually nailed it in a way. I got all my 4 quadrants more or less precisely the same. I was surprised though by stressful flow. What's it called?
Under pressure.
Yeah, exactly. The results were a bit different than I was expecting, but like it is what it is, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, let me give you and the viewers a quick summary of my understanding of your profile. Here it is. I'm sure you don't mind me sharing it. So what Ned Herman said was that we all know that the brain is split left and right. So let me ask you, George, what's the difference between left and right of the brain?
So in general, the left side of the brain is more the logical side of the brain, the convergent side of the brain, and the right side is more like the creative, intuitive side of the brain, or the divergent.
Perfect. Okay. And this was discovered now probably 50 years ago. Now, not what Ned Herman said was actually left and right, absolutely. But he also said there's top and bottom, giving us 4 quadrants to the brain. Now, Ned Herman, or HBDI, which is the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument, measures how we prefer to think. And there are 4 quadrants in how we prefer to think. We've got the blue quadrant, which is all about facts. So if you've got a mate who's very good down at the pub quiz, he's probably a blue, loads of facts. The yellow, this is the creative, the entrepreneurial type people who've got a million ideas and might be described as having their head in the clouds. We've got the red people. These are the touchy-feely people. What I love about the reds is if you walk into a room, they normally come over and touch your elbow. And then we've got our greens, who are our structured, planned, next project managers. All right, so this just describes how you prefer to think. You can't get it wrong. You can't get it right. This is George. All right.
Hello.
So having understood that, you have a tendency to think more in the right side of the brain. Your creativity, your big picture thinking's fairly high. Your people skills, your feelings fairly high, but your ability to do facts in the blue is quite low. And your green is, let's say it's fairly low too. All right, so you're a right side of the brain thinker. Nothing wrong with that, nothing right with that. It's just who you are. Now, what's particularly interesting is this solid line versus this dotted line is under pressure, your green shrinks. So you become less structured, less planned, and you become more red, more emotional. So if you think back, how does that manifest itself in your life, becoming less emotional, more emotional and less planned?
Well, that's actually the side that I really didn't understand in a way, because like when I'm under pressure, what happens is I turn off people. Like my right side, actually, I turn it all off and I go full on left side, and I become very analytical and very plan oriented in general. So this is like what my experience has been.
Okay, so let me just rewind and make sure I've got this right. So your solid line, you are a right brain thinker. That's where you're dominant. You like creativity, big picture, people. And then under pressure, the dotted line, I think I might have misspoke. Your structure, your green goes out more. Right, now we've got it. Now we've got it. So that ties in with what you actually do. All right. So let's come back to negotiation skills and stalemate. So let's say I'm a negotiation expert. What questions would you like to ask me that would help you to avoid stalemate, understand your opponent using this type of stuff? What questions do you have?
Okay, so first of all, I know that when you're negotiating with someone, it's important to bring in the facts. And since I do tend to have a low fact-based quadrant, how can I maximize it? How can I increase my blue quadrant or my analytical skills when I come across to this particular negotiation?
Okay, great question. So we can all do all 4 quadrants. It's just, if I use a metaphor, you do yellow and red in 5th gear if you were driving. Blue and green you're probably doing in 2nd gear, but we can all do all 4. It's just where we feel more comfortable, where our preferences. So you can do blue. It's accepting that it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to take you a bit longer, and you're probably going to procrastinate more to look for the facts, but you can do it. You can do it. So firstly, it's accepting we can do it. Secondly, it's accepting it's going to be a bit harder than normal. It's not like doing the red or yellow stuff. And then thirdly, it's getting on and doing it because you know the value of doing it.
Okay.
Right. Now, the second part in answering your question is, remember that if you're negotiating, not everyone wants facts. Now, I understand negotiation is a very logical piece that we do in the workplace, but if you're up against a yellow negotiator, let's say, they're probably going to want to understand the big picture. So the trick with HBDI and avoiding stalemates is to know who you're negotiating against.
How do you know that? Like, how can you, on the spot, know who your opponent or who you're negotiating with?
Yeah, 2 answers to that. One is the first one, you're not going to like it. It will take years of practice to understand. All right. Okay. But let's give you the silver bullet. Most face-to-face negotiations don't start with a face-to-face negotiation. You've probably been speaking to them or emailing them. So let me ask you a question. If you were to get an email from someone like this, what would that email look like? Bear in mind there are
lots of numbers and stats and.
Perfect. So you're picking up. Now, if you were to get an email from a yellow type person, what would it look like? This is big picture.
Big ideas, things that you want to do that are different, innovative, creative.
Very good. Very good. Okay, let's do the green.
The green is more planned. So what are the steps to do this? What are the next steps, etc., etc.? It's more geared toward that. Lovely. And the red is more about like people. Who do you know? Who do you know that can help me with this negotiation, or etc.? Or who can you refer me to, or who was your client? How, those kind of things. Of questions.
Very good, very good. What we particularly look for in our red negotiators when we're identifying them over email, they might share something they did at the weekend or something about their family. These guys are very sharing of what's going on in life, and also they're very warm and very enthusiastic people. So you can imagine the reds on a call like this are like that, which is great, like you are. The blues are very much like this.
Zen.
Yeah, it is. It's all good. They're right, we're right, it's just who you are. The trick here is if we can understand ourselves better and understand others better. And if I'm going into negotiation, or you are, and you're yellow to yellow, you're speaking French to French. Great, got that. But here, and it's hardest to communicate with people diagonally opposed to you, if you're going into a negotiation and you're talking to a green, you're talking French to Dutch.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen if you're talking French to Dutch in that negotiation?
Better speak English.
It's going to be hard. It will be hard to communicate, hard to understand. The green is saying to you, where's the timeline? Where's some of the detail? How do we map this? And you're thinking, no, I just want to talk the big picture. And so you're doing this.
I have a question. What if, for example, like would nonverbal communication work best in this scenario, for example?
It's always good to understand nonverbal communication. So if we take an email. You don't know what's going on with their tone. You're guessing, you're trying to, particularly if there's lots of money at stake, so you're very emotive. I might lose 10,000, I might lose 100,000. So you're trying to guess what's going on. So that we would always propose face-to-face is absolutely best. Because even here, you can't see what I'm doing with my hands down here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I might be tapping on the table, but you can't see that. But you could if we were face-to-face. And if I'm tapping on the table, I'm frustrated and I'm fed up. And we might be heading towards stalemate. So yes, we're looking for body language. We're looking to understand their body language, what we're giving off, and using all those cues to build better communication.
Thank you.
Okay. So lots of people get into stalemate on negotiation, and the reason they do is largely because they're miscommunicating. Now that makes it sound really easy. If we just don't miscommunicate, we'll be fine. But I mean that we are talking French to Dutch. We are not giving these people what we want. All right.
So how do we do that, Darren? How do we solve the situation, this stalemate?
Well, it's back to what I was saying before. We can do all four colors. The first thing we need to do is recognize who we are. Which color are we? Which thinking preference do we have? Okay, good. The second thing, which thinking preference do they have? And we can pick that up from their email or their phone call, maybe before we get to the face-to-face or before we get to the negotiation. Next part we need to do is prepare our negotiation in a way that communicates what we want, and we're most importantly exploring what they want. Now, there are 4 stages of negotiation. What most people do is skip the first 2 and go to this one. The first one is preparation. Most people's preparation for a negotiation is they think about it in the car journey there. That's not preparation. That's having a think. Or they do the very worst thing. They open up PowerPoint and start typing. PowerPoint is not a negotiation tool. It's a presentation tool. Yeah. Now, if people were to Google Square Dance MBM, you'll find a negotiation preparation tool, but that's for another day. The second stage they miss is exploration. So I'll give you an example. I'm standing on the garage forecourt of a second-hand car dealership. You come over to me and I'm looking at this lovely red sports car. And George, you say to me, Darren, it's only got 20,000 miles. It had one owner who was a vicar, and you give me the whole spiel. But actually, it doesn't matter, because if only you'd asked me one question, you'd understand that I've got 5 kids and the chance of me buying that sports car are none.
Yeah.
So we've got to negotiate and propose on what they want as best we can, but we need to understand what they want. If I ask you what you want and you tell me, I'm going to give it to you, but at least I know.
Yeah.
And that's the third stage. Once we do the exploration, we then propose, then we summarize.
I love it. I do have a question based on what you were saying. So at the beginning of this question you were answering, you were saying you need to know yourself and which quadrant you are in. What if I'm more than one quadrant? Like, for example, I think in my case, I'm very close between the yellow and the red.
Yes, sure.
So more or less, we can say that they're kind of the same. It's like 1 or 2 degrees difference or something. So how do you approach that? And let's say it's the same with the person you're negotiating with. So let's say the person you're negotiating with also has 2 or more quadrants, because you know that there are people that can. I think from what I've read that there are 3% only in the world that have the 4 quadrants equally.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Equal scores.
Yeah, exactly. So for the rest of us who are not among those 3%, and for those that have 2 or more quadrants, how do you deal with that?
Well, let's say that the person we're negotiating with, we think is particularly blue and yellow. They operate or have a thinking preference in the top of the brain. So we must make sure that our negotiation preparation deals with the big picture. So where's this negotiation going in 12 months? What's the impact of it in 12 months? We must have answered those questions for ourselves. And then also in the blue, have we got all the facts as well? That's what we need to answer.
Sorry, I got laughing moment.
So we're operating in the top half. They're operating in the top half of the brain. they're blue and they're yellow, and we've got to make sure we prepare accordingly because they're the questions they're going to ask, the French questions. So we've got to talk French back to them.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. What other questions did you have around either stalemate negotiations or understanding your opponent better in negotiations?
So I was wondering if, like, how can we negotiate better based on not the 4 quadrants, but based on the clusters or the form or the models?
Oh, so yeah, I mean, using the HBDI model is the best model I've seen for helping people to negotiate better.
Okay.
Because it's simple.
Okay.
Now, whenever I talk to people about Myers-Briggs, which is a very valid and credible profile, most people can't remember their letters, and then they can't remember what it means. But with Herman and HBDI, it's very simple. I'm a yellow, I'm a red, I'm a blah, blah, blah. And they can simply understand that. And what happens when we train people in HBDI, they then go out into the world and they come back and they go, I was in the shop the other day and the checkout person was really chatty. Do you think they're a red? Probably. And they start to recognize what other people are, which really helps them at work because then they start to identify colors at work, why they get on with some people, why they don't. And then they move into their negotiations and why some of their negotiations they struggle with and they don't. So HBDI is the best model for helping you to understand how to negotiate better because it's simple.
Okay. So it's about the simplicity.
Now, clusters is a whole advanced bit that we'll have to cover in another podcast because it goes deeper. I'll give you an example. There are 7 or 8 billion people on the planet, and we're putting them into 4 groups. Now, we know that people are more different than that. So clusters gets into the red the red quadrant, for instance, and there are lots of clusters within that. So if we take the yellow, for instance, within the yellow, there might be an extreme big picture thinker who's not very good at creativity. That's very possible. And yet you and I are lumping all the yellows together.
Okay.
So it's when we get deeper, we understand them better.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So stalemate, we've understood. Don't get into stalemate where possible by understanding your person. And prepare according to which thinking preference you think they have by picking up on their emails or their phone calls.
That's amazing.
All right. What other questions did you have thinking about your profile and negotiation stalemates?
So let's try to think of an example. I'm going to try to think of an example to make it more. At the beginning of the call or at the beginning of our podcast, we talked about what can I do. So when I have someone that's analytical in front of me and I have a low analytical skills, what can I do? I'm going to ask the other way around. What can I do when I have, for example, a high red or high yellow or high green? How can I maximize it to negotiate even better with the person in front of me?
Yeah, so it's about floating their boat. We like people like ourselves. Our friends are typically similar thinking preferences to ourselves. The people we recruit at work, if we're in the position of recruiting, we typically bring the same people in as ourselves. The danger with that is we end up all being one color, thinking the same way. Yeah. So let's imagine you're a team where total yellows. We carved out the other 3/4 of their brain. What would that team act like if they were total yellows?
So if there were total yellows, lots of creativity and the ideas would be coming right, left, and center, but there wouldn't be much organization, at least initially. Not real, no facts, or not as much as we wanted to.
Okay, so ideally we want a team, a company, a person to try and move in all 4 quadrants, accepting that it's quite hard. So coming back to your question of reds particularly, we'll start here.
I got a question when you're done.
Okay, so reds, and this will count for any person, but particularly with reds, this is the trust equation. The trust equation is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. The important part here for the reds is intimacy.
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't mean that you and I need to hug, although I'm sure that will be lovely. Intimacy is a bit about where do you live? What's your family like? I've got 2 kids. Where did you grow up? It's about getting to know each other. Because there's a famous piece of research that says if you and I have something in common, the chances of achieving a better win are higher, and also the chances of getting a win are much higher. So that's how you might deal with the reds, by improving the intimacy, pushing it a little bit. At the weekend, I did this. What did you do? And it can be quite small. With the green as an example, we certainly ought to have some sort of timeline. So if we negotiate here and we win it here, the impact of this is here, this then happens, and so on. Because the Greens want that structure to see that what's going to happen will happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
A question came up. That's the I in me.
Okay.
The yellow, sorry, in me. Would you recommend, so for when a company wants to go into negotiation, when 2 companies are going into negotiations, would you recommend that they bring teams of different quadrants together, or just focus on one depending on the strength of the company?
How many people are negotiating? Is it sort of 2-on-2, 3-on-3 type thing, or 1-on-1?
Let's try both examples. Like if it's 1-on-1 and if it's like yeah.
All right. I wouldn't change the people according to HBDI. I'll give you a simile. I wouldn't use HBDI as an absolute recruitment tool.
So that was another good question. I
wouldn't recruit people based on which color they are. I would use it as another piece of information that would help me understand them.
Okay.
And it might be, oh, that would fit well in here, but only if all these other things fit. So HBDI in its own right cannot be used as a single decision-making tool, but it can be part of making an informed decision. So I wouldn't change the negotiators according to their colors. I would encourage them to role play, for instance. If with this person's going in to negotiate with this person and we know they're a blue and they're a red, well, let's do a role play internally with a blue, because our phrase is it's better to sweat in training than bleed in battle.
Yeah, I love it.
So we want to make them sweat, and the role play will make them sweat, because if they do that, they'll hit all the blind alleys they would have hit in real life.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final questions you want to understand about negotiation stalemate and HBDI?
I have more of a fun question relating to that. Famous people. Everybody loves famous people, and everybody wants to know how they relate to famous people. So I was thinking if you could give us maybe the best or among the best negotiators in each of the 4 quadrants. Okay. For example. And maybe how their process, like how why they're the best negotiator in this quadrant. Like what is their process, if possible?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can do that, but I'll try it this way. So I imagine that the CEOs and particularly founders must have been good negotiators, because at some point they've negotiated contracts and people and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, then I will take it back. Which color do you think Steve Jobs was of Apple?
Yellow.
Okay, so yellow. Loads of ideas. Brilliant. So he negotiated from a yellow perspective because that was his thinking preference. And he ran Apple with lots of great ideas, innovations. It was amazing, wasn't it? And now Tim Cook's taken over some years ago. Which color do you think Tim is?
I don't know him very well, but he's definitely not a yellow. I think he's more of a green or blue. I'm not sure which of the 2.
So Apple's gone from a very innovative, lots of ideas, cutting edge, now being overtaken by Samsung and Google for lots of their things, though they're still living off Steve Jobs' legacy of brilliant ideas like iPad. but now they're a really profitable company, which would suggest to me that Tim Cook and the people that he's recruiting beneath him are all blues. Lots of data analysis, lots of how can we make more money, lots of how can we make this a really valuable company. The problem is they have lost Steve Jobs' ideas legacy. So what, 5-10 years and they'll be overtaken.
Yeah, love it.
So I'd say negotiators, we've got Tim Cook as the blue, we've got Steve Jobs as the yellow. Yeah. Other negotiators, green and red. We're looking for very fiery people that are probably red or very people. So I'd probably use Anita Roddick for our red, who was the founder of Body Shop. And I imagine she had some tough negotiations, not just over price, of course, when she was first setting up, but also trying to get a vision out there, trying to be heard. So I think Anita Roddick as a red probably negotiated from a position of absolute passion.
That's nice.
But also negotiated to win people's hearts and minds. And I think she did that very well. Otherwise, I believe Body Shop will have died.
Yeah.
Before it even started.
I would have put actually Richard Branson in the red.
Yes. Yeah. Probably.
No?
Yeah, I think I'd go there. I think the one I'm struggling with is the green. Who would be our negotiator in the green? I'm thinking maybe Sir Alan Sugar. Not sure. He could be a blue. Yeah, I'm struggling with the green negotiator at the moment.
Warren Buffett, where would you put him, blue or green?
Well, because he's all about data and stocks and markets. I mean, he's probably yellow blue. So I think he operates in the top half of the brain. The green, we're looking for someone very, very dependable, not risk adverse. And that's the trouble. When we think of CEOs and entrepreneurs, we tend to think of people who are more wanting to take risks, whereas greens are quite risk adverse. So we're probably looking for someone like Sir Peter Davis, who used to run Prudential, who I met a couple of times and was he was all about consistency rather than peaks. He was happy with this. So I would say that he's probably our green.
Okay, love it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask you, George, to tell me your 3 takeaway points that you've got that will help our viewers to understand negotiation, stalemate, and HBDI.
Okay. So my 3 points, what I would say is the 4 processes that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So first, you need to be prepared, know yourself, be prepared and everything. Second, you need to explore. It's important to know and ask questions to know who the person you're negotiating with is. Yep. Third, you need to plan. And fourth, you need to close the deal, basically, or do the presentation or stuff like this. So this was one thing I remembered. I remember a lot of things, but like I'm trying to bring out the things that are the most valuable, at least for me.
That's good.
So this was very valuable. Another point that was very valuable is what is it? So, for example, that even though I don't have a high analytical model or way of thinking, I can get the best out of my yellow and red type of thinking to bring in great ideas like Steve Jobs, like Richard Branson, and other people. Not putting myself in their categories, but like you never know.
That's fair. No, that's fair. Yeah. That's good. Good to aim high. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And the third point that I would say is, what would it be?
Well, we talked about the trust equation, might be one that you're particularly interested in. So just tell us about that, what you remember from there.
So the trust equation. So if we're talking, for example, about people that are in the red quadrant, they tend to focus mainly on intimacy, which is I, and it's not really about just hugging. It's more like because you have different levels and different types of intimacy, but in this particular case, it's more about sharing personal stories, sharing what you did over the weekend, things about the family, the friends, etc., etc. So this is the kind of thing.
Fabulous, fabulous. All right. So my summary of where we got to is, please look up, this is for viewers and for yourself, please look up on our blog the 4 stages of negotiation, because that will really help. Also look up the trust equation, as George was just talking about. And also we've got 9 ways to avoid stalemate, which will be a great article to read as well. The upcoming podcasts we've got are, I wrote I really don't know how to manage conflict at work. Use HBDI to manage conflict at work. That'll be a good one for you and I to get our teeth into. If you have any conflicts. The other one we've got is my team is not performing well. What can I do? Use HBDI to build a high performing team. Okay, what do you think about that one? That's coming up.
I love all of them, actually. They're very interesting because each has its own perspective and really good to explore.
And the other one we've got coming up on HBDI, we've got 4, is I can't find my prospects. What can I do? I can't get them to reply. Use HBDI to get your prospects to reply.
That's going to be a hit because everybody wants to know how to bring in more clients and prospects and turn them into clients, and it's going to be really interesting.
It is, and here's a spoiler. It's about using HBDI to communicate in the language they're speaking. But let's do more of that next time.
I love it.
All right. So, George, thank you. Thank you for sharing your profile. We'll put that up as part of the podcast, that picture. I'm sure you'll be okay with that. And we'll also put George's details should you want to reach out to him. And we'll come back at you with our next HBDI podcast very soon. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Darren. Have a great day.